My name is Emily Carter, 27 years old, a data analyst at a tech company in Seattle. For years, my life was calm and predictable, built on spreadsheets, quiet routines, and the soft comfort of tea in the evenings. I liked the stillness, the safety of numbers that never lied. But everything fell apart when I got pregnant with my first child and came face to face with the nightmare behind the man I once thought I loved, Derek Mason. Derek, 34, a former Marine now working as a private security officer, used to seem like the kind of man who could make any woman feel protected. He had that steady gaze, that confident stance, and a voice that could turn ordinary words into promises. He'd show up at my office with scarlet roses, whispering that I was his world. I believed him. What I didn't see then was the shadow beneath his charm. The quiet possessiveness, the questions disguised as care, the way he needed to control everything. Behind every smile, there was a storm waiting to break. And I had no idea how close I was to being trapped inside it. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories. They're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. His jealousy grew like a wildfire, irrational, consuming, and impossible to control. He checked my phone constantly, demanded to know who I was texting, where I was going, and why I didn't answer fast enough. Every argument ended with him punching the wall, veins bulging, his breath hot with rage. I learned to shrink into silence just to keep the peace. When I finally ended things, Derek didn't disappear. He lingered like a dark ghost I couldn't shake off. The messages started first. "You'll regret this. You can't hide from me." Then came the late-night visits, the shadow of his figure standing outside my apartment window long after midnight. The worst came one evening when I returned home to the sharp, metallic scent of gas filling the air. My hands trembled as I turned off the stove and realized what he'd done. The entire building had to be evacuated that night. Neighbors coughing, alarms blaring, lights flashing in the cold Seattle rain. As I stood shivering on the curb, watching firefighters storm my apartment, I knew then, Derek wasn't just angry. He was dangerous. The fateful day. That day was supposed to be one of the happiest moments of my life, my baby shower. It was held at my mother's cozy suburban home just outside Seattle, surrounded by maple trees and the gentle hum of spring rain against the windows. My two best friends, Sarah and Chloe, had planned every detail with such care. Sarah, 29, a free-spirited freelance journalist, brought her camera to capture every moment. Chloe, 28, a sweet and patient elementary school teacher, handled the decorations. The living room was filled with soft pink balloons, a pastel banner that read, "Welcome, little girl," and a two-tier cake topped with tiny fondant baby shoes. Everything looked perfect, except for the storm raging inside me. I was 8 months pregnant, my belly heavy and tight, my hands trembling every time my phone buzzed. 'Cause Derek hadn't stopped. Not for a single day. That morning, he'd sent another message, short, sharp, and chilling. 3 p.m. today. I'm coming to take back what's mine. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. Clock on the wall suddenly seemed louder than usual, ticking down the hours like a countdown to something I couldn't escape. I kept glancing at the window, half expecting to see his dark truck parked outside, the engine running, waiting. Sarah noticed the color drain from my face and took my hand. "Emily," she said softly, her eyes steady but full of worry, "you don't have to face him alone this time." Chloe, standing beside her, nodded firmly. "We've got someone who can help. Someone who'll be here before he shows up." I frowned, not understanding. Then Sarah opened the door to the hallway, and a man stepped in. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and looked like he could hold his ground in any kind of fight. His t-shirt stretched across a chest built from hours in the gym, and his hands, rough, steady, hung at his sides like he wasn't sure what to do with them. "This is Jake Sullivan," Sarah said quickly, glancing between us. "He's a software engineer." We ran into him near the cafe downtown. He dropped his bag and we saw the name tag on his luggage. She gave a small, nervous laugh. "We might have recruited him." Jake shifted awkwardly, his dark eyes flicking toward me. "I know this sounds crazy," he said, his voice calm but uncertain. "They told me someone was in trouble and, well, I couldn't just walk away." Took me a second to recognize him. Jake. From the university. We'd both taken that data analytics workshop years ago. I remembered his quiet presence, the way he'd always offered to carry extra laptops for the group, the subtle kindness in his tone when he spoke. Now he was standing in my mother's living room, looking every bit like a stranger dropped into a nightmare. I forced a shaky smile. "You don't have to do this." "Derek, he's unpredictable." Jake shrugged slightly. "So am I when someone's being threatened." Sarah crossed her arms, clearly determined. "Emily, you're not fighting this alone anymore. Derek shows up, we'll call the police. Jake will stay until it's safe." The room fell silent for a moment. Sighed, thunder rolled in the distance, low and steady like a warning. My mother was in the kitchen, humming softly, unaware of the tension tightening every breath in the room. I rested a hand on my stomach, feeling the faint flutter of the baby's movement, a reminder of what was truly at stake. Then the clock struck 2:30. Every sound seemed amplified. The clinking of teacups, the faint whir of the ceiling fan, Sarah's fingers nervously tapping on the table. Jake sat near the window, eyes scanning the street like a quiet sentinel. And me, I sat on the edge of the couch, my phone clutched in my hand, staring at Derek's last message. 3 p.m. Half an hour left. Half an hour before the man I once loved might walk through that door again. No roses, no charm, just the cold rage of someone who believed I still belonged to him. For the first time in months, though, I didn't feel completely alone. There were people around me, Sarah, Chloe, and this unexpected stranger, ready to stand their ground when I could barely stand on my own. Still, deep down, a single question echoed in my mind like a whisper I couldn't silence. Would Derek really dare to show up, or had the nightmare already found another way to begin? The nightmare began the moment Jake stepped into the room. Conversation faltered like a record scratched. A dozen pairs of eyes turned toward him, measuring, curious, protective. My throat tightened and I forced a smile so brittle it could have split. I called him baby's father when my voice shook, an instinctive, ridiculous little lie to keep up appearances, and felt each syllable land like a small shield between Derek and me. Sarah, never one for half measures, leaned forward and announced it louder, the way a reporter might declare a fact into a microphone. "This is Jake Sullivan, the father of Emily's baby." The living room fell into an odd, stunned silence. Forks hovered midair. The chatter that had filled the room evaporated. I looked at Jake, searching for some flicker of recognition, and found it there for a heartbeat, an answering glance that said, "I remember you from university." Then, as if flipping a switch, he stepped into the role we'd asked him to play. His shoulders squared, his jaw set, and he planted himself beside me like a moving wall. It was ridiculous and yet comforting, that certainty of a person occupying space on my side. Chloe sat on my other side, fingers clasped tight around mine. Sarah's camera hung forgotten at her neck. My mother, Helen, rose from her seat, the soft lines of her face drawn taut with worry. The air in the room felt strained, like a bow pulled taut, ready to snap. At exactly 3 o'clock the sound came, a low, insistent rumble that rolled down the street and into the bones of the house. We all turned toward the windows. Derek's truck didn't ease into the driveway. It announced itself, an intrusion that felt monstrous in the small, normal world of my mother's home. He strode in without knocking, as if the house had an invisible line of ownership he believed he could cross. He was bigger than I remembered, Or perhaps the danger makes small things loom larger. 6 feet tall, a sleeveless shirt stretched across thick arms, military tattoos snaking down one bicep in dark ink. He moved like a man practiced at getting what he wanted, certain, predatory. His face was a hard set of angles, lips twisted in a contemptuous smile that didn't reach his eyes. When his gaze swept the room and landed on Jake, a bitter laugh escaped him. "Replacing me, huh? How cute." The words were a blade wrapped in amusement. They found their mark. My chest tightened until I could hardly breathe. Jake answered slowly, each word measured, steady. "I am the father of her baby. This is a family gathering. You don't belong here." There was no bravado in his voice, only an evenness that made him sound immovable. It was the sort of calm that either diffuses a fight or breaks into one. I didn't know which. Derek's expression flickered, annoyance crossing his features before settling into something darker. He advanced a step, closing the distance with the arrogance of a man who expects obedience. Without a thought, Jake shifted in front of me, a silent line drawn. I felt the space close around my ribs, the baby stirring as if protesting the tension. My mother's voice cut through like a command. "Get out of my house, Derek." Helen's hands were clenched at her sides. She didn't raise her voice, but it held an authority that had governed my childhood and still carried weight. "For a beat," he paused, measuring whether the stubbornness in this suburban living room was worth the price. He retreated a few steps, not for fear but because he chose to. Before the door had shut behind him, he left a promise like a shadow across the threshold. "This isn't over, Jake. I'll find out everything about you." The threat hung in the air, heavy and intimate. When the front door clicked closed, a collective exhale swept the room, soft and ragged like the unspooling of a taut rope. But the relief was brittle. We all knew the quiet after the storm is often just the beginning of another kind of thunder. My hands were cold, and Chloe wrapped a blanket around my shoulders with the reverent tenderness she always reserved for children and broken things. Sarah moved to the window, peering out as if Derek might reappear like a bad thought made flesh. Jake sat back down slowly, the posture of a man who had just stepped out of a fight and chosen to live through it. He smiled at me then, quick and awkward, the way someone apologizes for a job they didn't ask for but volunteered for nonetheless. "I'm not going anywhere," he said softly. That sentence should have calmed me. Instead, it made my stomach knot, the knowledge that Derek had promised to dig, to poke, to unsettle our fragile safety. The house felt watched now, every shadow suspicious. My baby moved again, a small, insistent kick against the pressure inside me, as if to remind me that even in fear there was life. Side, the rain had begun again, soft at first and then harder, tapping against the panes like nervous fingers. Inside, we gathered the pieces of the afternoon, teacups, sugar bowls, the fondant shoe from the cake, and tried to stitch them into something that resembled a party. But beneath the paper streamers and polite smiles, a new reality had settled. The man who thought he owned me was awake and hunting, and we had only the thinnest of defenses between him and the life I was trying to protect. Danger escalates. After the baby shower, the real nightmare began. The tension that had filled that afternoon didn't end with Derek's departure. It merely changed shape, becoming something quieter, more insidious. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a video message. It was a clip of me at the supermarket, pushing a cart, smiling faintly as I checked a grocery list on my phone. The footage was grainy but close, too close. My stomach dropped as I realized it had been filmed from inside the store. Beneath the video, a message appeared. "Don't think you can replace me." My hands went numb. Jake was at work when it arrived, but when I showed him later, the muscles in his jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. That same night, he found the tires of his car slashed clean through. Hours later, a photo came to his phone. His apartment building, taken from the street below. Underneath was a caption that read, "See you soon, hero." I felt sick with guilt. Jake had been nothing more than a good man caught in someone else's chaos. "I'm sorry," I whispered over and over. "You shouldn't have to go through this." But Jake only shook his head, his expression unwavering. "I told you I'd help," he said simply, his voice calm but fierce. "I'm not leaving you alone in this." Derek's obsession deepened. He stormed into Sarah's workplace one afternoon, shouting that I was keeping his child hostage. Security had to drag him out. Then came the emails, anonymous but unmistakably his, sent to my boss. He accused me of being mentally unstable, of fabricating threats for attention. Within a week, HR asked me to take a temporary leave until things settled down. They didn't settle. One night, when Jake and I were staying at my mother's house for safety, the sound of shattering glass tore through the quiet. I screamed as a brick crashed through the living room window, scattering shards across the floor. Another followed, wrapped in paper. Jake grabbed me, pushing me down to the floor, shielding my stomach with his body. The brick landed just inches away, unrolling a crumpled note. "You'll never escape, Emily." Chloe, who had been sleeping in the guest room, bolted out, phone in hand. "I'm calling 911, she shouted. My mother stood frozen by the doorway, her hand over her heart. The baby inside me kicked wildly, as if sensing the panic radiating through my body. Sirens arrived minutes later, their flashing lights painting the walls in red and blue. The neighbor's security camera had caught everything: Derek's unmistakable frame, his truck parked across the street, his arm winding back as he hurled the bricks. It should have been the end of it. Police arrested him that night, charging him with vandalism and assault. I remember watching through the blinds as they led him away in handcuffs, his face twisted with fury, eyes burning holes through the night. For the first time in months, I exhaled. Maybe it was over. But the relief was brief. By morning, Derek was out on bail, free again, somewhere out there watching. The thought hit me like cold water. The system could stop him for a moment, but not forever. And as the wind howled outside my mother's house that night, I knew one truth with terrifying clarity: Derek wasn't finished. Not yet. The legal battle and lingering fear. Derek began using the legal system as his newest weapon. Within weeks of his arrest, he filed a lawsuit demanding parental rights, insisting that he was the father of my unborn child. Even after 2 separate DNA tests proved he wasn't, he refused to let go. His attorney, a sharp, calculating woman with a smile that never reached her eyes, painted me as a manipulative, unstable mother. In court, she claimed I had used Jake to brainwash the child before she was even born. Her words slithered through the courtroom, twisting everything I'd endured into something monstrous and unrecognizable. Each hearing drained me. My stomach churned, and I often vomited afterward from the sheer stress. The thought that Derek might somehow gain access to my baby, my Lily, haunted every breath I took. When Lily was finally born, I thought the nightmare might end. But the day I held her in my arms for the first time, Derek appeared at the hospital. Cameras in hand, he went live on social media, shouting that I had stolen his daughter and destroyed his family. Commotion drew nurses, doctors, and eventually security guards. I sat frozen, clutching Lily close as tears spilled down my cheeks, not from joy but from terror. Purity escorted him out, his voice echoing down the hallway. Minutes later, my phone buzzed with a message. "I'll always be near." 2 more DNA tests would later reaffirm the truth. He wasn't Lily's father. Yet his lawyer kept filing motions, appeals, and accusations, stretching the nightmare endlessly. Each court date, each letter from his attorney felt like a new wound opening. The law, I realized, wasn't always a shield. Sometimes it was just another battlefield where monsters wore suits and smiled while they bled you dry. The breaking point and the liberation. Everything came to a head one rain-soaked night at a hotel on the outskirts of Seattle, the place Jake, Lily, and I had chosen as our temporary refuge. The room was quiet except for the rhythmic hum of the air conditioner and Lily's soft breathing in her crib. I remember sitting on the bed, half asleep, lulled by the illusion of safety when the sound of metal scraping against metal cut through the silence. First, I thought it was a door down the hall, but then I heard the click of our adjoining door handle. Before I could react, it burst open. Derek. He stepped out of the shadows, face gaunt, eyes burning with the same cold fury I'd seen months ago. In his hand glinted something silver, a knife, the very one he'd once brandished at my baby shower before being disarmed. My blood turned to ice. "Thought you could hide from me?" He sneered. "Thought you could steal my family?" I screamed, instinctively shielding Lily as Jake lunged forward from the small kitchenette. The world turned into chaos, furniture crashing, glass shattering, the guttural sounds of two men locked in violent struggle. Derek swung the knife wildly, grazing Jake's arm before Jake tackled him to the ground. The blade skittered across the tile, landing inches from my feet. Lily's terrified cries filled the room, high and piercing. My hand shook so badly I could barely reach for her, holding her tight against my chest as Jake pinned Derek down. Derek thrashed, spitting curses, the veins in his neck straining. The air reeked of sweat and fear. Then sirens. Shouting in the hallway. A pounding at the door. "Police! Step back." Jake released his grip just as two officers burst in, followed by the hotel's security guards. Within seconds, Derek was restrained, his wrists locked in cuffs as he roared my name, his voice feral. "You think this ends here, Emily?" he shouted, struggling against the officers. "You can't erase me." I could barely stand. My knees gave out and Jake caught me before I hit the floor. His shirt was torn, blood seeping from a small cut on his arm. Lily screamed in his direction until she saw him smile, reassuring her through the trembling. It was over, at least that night was. When the police took Derek away, the list of charges was long: breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted kidnapping. And this time, the judge denied bail. The threat that had haunted every corner of my life was finally behind bars. At the trial months later, I wasn't the only one standing before the court. One by one, other women came forward, voices that had once been silenced by shame or fear. There was Laura, a nurse from Tacoma, who described how Derek had followed her for months after their breakup. Renee, a student from Portland, testified that she'd moved states just to escape him. Their stories mirrored mine, different details, same horror. When it was my turn, I looked Derek straight in the eye. He smirked at first, but as my voice grew stronger, describing every night I'd spent wondering if he'd show up at my door, something in his face faltered. The judge's verdict came down like thunder: 7 years in prison. The moment those words echoed through the courtroom, my tears finally came. Not the panicked tears of fear, but the deep, shuddering release of someone who had been holding her breath for far too long. I could breathe again. A new beginning. After the storm, life didn't instantly return to normal. It slowly rebuilt itself, one day at a time. Jake never left. He stayed by my side through sleepless nights, through Lily's cries and my lingering nightmares. He learned to change diapers with the precision of a soldier, warmed bottles at 3 a.m., and hummed lullabies off-key until Lily giggled herself to sleep. I watched him with awe and quiet gratitude. The man who had stepped into a lie to protect me had become the truth I didn't know I needed. Our love didn't ignite like lightning. Grew gently and steadily out of small moments. Jake laughing at my terrible jokes, his hand brushing mine while feeding Lily, the way his face softened whenever he held her. 1 year later, we gathered at the same house where it had all begun. My mother's home, once a battlefield of fear, now filled with laughter and pink ribbons. Sarah and Chloe were there, beaming, cameras ready. Lily toddled between us in a tiny white dress, her curls bouncing. Then Jake knelt before me, a velvet box in his hand, his smile trembling with emotion. "We started with a lie," he said, voice cracking slightly. "But somehow that lie led me to everything real." I couldn't speak. Tears streamed down my face as I nodded, the room erupting in cheers. Lily clapped her little hands, squealing as if she understood the joy around her. We were married 3 months later, right there in my mother's backyard. The same walls Derek had once shattered now gleamed with soft white lights and fresh flowers. Lily, now 2 years old, was our flower girl, tossing petals in every direction and laughing like sunlight. When I looked around that day, the garden glowing under a golden Seattle sunset, my friends smiling, my mother crying happy tears, I realized how far we had come. From fear to freedom. From chaos to peace. Of course, the past didn't vanish completely. Derek still sent letters from prison, sometimes through his mother, sometimes anonymously. I never opened them. I learned that closure isn't about answers. It's about refusing to let darkness write the next chapter. Lily grew fast, curious, kind, full of light. She didn't know the shadow that had hovered over her earliest days, and I planned to keep it that way. Jake became her whole world, the man who taught her to laugh louder, to try again after every fall. One quiet afternoon, while teaching her how to ride her little blue bike, she looked up at me and asked, "Mommy, why doesn't my little brother have a different dad like me?" Her question caught me off guard, but I smiled, kneeling down to meet her gaze. "Because you're special, sweetheart. Your daddy chose to love you even before he ever met you." She seemed to think about that, her small brow furrowed, before grinning and pedaling forward. Jake jogged beside her, steady hands ready to catch her if she wobbled. I watched them, my husband, my daughter, the fragile miracle of peace after years of fear, and felt something shift inside me. Not everything broken stays that way. Some things rebuild themselves into something stronger, more beautiful. That night, after Lily fell asleep, I sat by the window of our home, watching the city lights shimmer across the water. The air was calm, the kind of calm that once felt impossible. Jake wrapped his arms around me from behind and whispered, "We made it." And for the first time, I truly believed him. 5 lessons I learned after everything. 1. Never mistake control for love. When Derek said he did everything because he loved me, I used to believe him. But real love doesn't make you afraid to speak. Doesn't demand obedience or make you feel trapped. If someone needs to control you to keep you, that's not love, that's a cage. 2. Trust your intuition. Deep down, I knew something was wrong long before things turned violent. But I kept quiet, afraid people would say I was overreacting. The truth is, a woman's intuition is her first line of defense. Listen to that voice, it's there to protect you. 3. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I once thought strength meant surviving alone. But I learned that reaching out to friends, family, or even the police isn't weakness. It's courage. Healing often begins the moment you let someone stand beside you. For you can rebuild no matter how much you've lost. There was a time I thought my life was over, my job gone, my safety shattered, my faith in people destroyed. But step by step, I found light again. Pain changes you, yes, but it can also shape a stronger version of yourself. 5. Real love doesn't rescue you, it respects you. Jake didn't come into my life to save me. He stood beside me, believed me, and reminded me I was capable of saving myself. Love should never erase your strength, it should amplify it. If you've ever been through something similar, or know someone who has, remember, you are not alone. You deserve peace, safety, and a love that never hurts. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps more people find courage, healing, and hope, just like I did.